A nuclear war with China is a real possibility. A brazen new attack by Chinese hackers, and a Chinese government plan to boost masculinity. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So, we are in a Cold War with the Chinese Communist Party. And what's a Cold War without the threat of nuclear annihilation? A nuclear war with China is a real possibility. That's according to the head of U.S. Strategic Command, Admiral Charles Richard. He wrote his rather grim summary in this month's issue of Proceedings, the U.S. Naval Institute's monthly magazine. There is a real possibility that a regional crisis with Russia or China could escalate quickly to a conflict involving nuclear weapons if they perceived a conventional loss would threaten the regime or state. Sort of the Andros model. If I go down, I'm taking you with me. Consequently, the U.S. military must shift its principal assumption from nuclear employment is not possible to nuclear employment is a very real possibility, which is why I'm happy to announce a new company I'm starting called Vault Tech Industries. We build for you the absolute highest quality fallout shelters, guaranteed not to be secret, horrific sociological experiments. Trust me. But you shouldn't worry too much about Cold War II, because first, you should worry about proxy wars. Once again, China has sent military planes into Taiwan's airspace, but this time, a U.S. military aircraft joined as well. And so China took the opportunity to remind everyone that Taiwan independence means war. Obviously, Taiwan is already an independent country. China's not flying provocative warplanes into their own airspace, but let's not tell them that. So, how will the Biden administration handle an increasingly aggressive Chinese Communist Party? A State Department spokesman says Biden wants to be lockstep with America's allies on China. Hopefully, the spokesman is referring to being lockstep with Taiwan on defense, not lockstep with our European allies on their China investment deal. Which brings us to Gina Raimondo. She's Biden's pick for Commerce Secretary. She's spoken about protecting U.S. telecom networks from Chinese companies. But in her nomination speech, she didn't say whether or not the Biden administration would keep Chinese telecom Huawei on a blacklist. The U.S. has been calling Huawei a national security threat since the Obama administration. But the Trump administration went further by actually putting Huawei on a trade blacklist. Now, House Republicans, led by Michael McCaul, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, wants to delay Raimondo's confirmation until the administration makes its Huawei stance clear. The fact that the Biden administration has still refused to commit to keeping Huawei on the Department of Commerce's entity list is incredibly alarming and dangerous. So, they want to place a hold on Ms. Raimondo's confirmation until the Biden administration clarifies their intentions for Huawei and on export control policies for a country that is carrying out genocide and threatening our national security. It is kind of hard to say, I really want to do business with a country that's committing genocide. Of course, not all countries have problems doing business with those committing genocide, like Myanmar. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Myanmar has billions of dollars of investment deals going with the Chinese communist regime. Myanmar also had a military coup this week. China has blocked the UN from condemning the coup, and if the US isn't careful, it could push Myanmar closer to China. For more on the Myanmar coup and what it means for the Biden administration's attempts to deal with China, check out yesterday's episode on America Uncovered. According to Reuters, Chinese hackers may have exploited a bug in Solarwinds software to spy on a U.S. federal payroll agency. Don't worry, the The software flaw exploited by the suspected Chinese group is separate from the one the United States has accused Russian government operatives of using to compromise sensitive federal agencies. Is that supposed to make me feel better? Two hostile authoritarian regimes were able to separately break into Solarwinds? I'd actually feel better if they had to work together to crack it. Like some kind of terrible sequel to Hackers, where Russia is played by Steven Seagal and China is played by Jackie Chan. Now to Hong Kong refugees, which is now pretty much anyone in Hong Kong looking to escape the long arm of Beijing. The new Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has suggested the U.S. could give them sanctuary. In an interview with MSNBC, Blinken said, "We see people who are again in Hong Kong standing up for their own rights, the rights that they felt were guaranteed to them, and if they're the victims of repression from Chinese authorities, we should do something to give them haven." Back in December, there was a bill that would grant temporary refuge to Hong Kongers. It unanimously passed in the House, but was blocked in the Senate by Ted Cruz. He worried there weren't enough safeguards in place to prevent Chinese spies from sneaking in as well. Meanwhile, the UK is offering Hong Kong residents a route to citizenship. Hong Kong residents can apply for a British National Overseas Passport, or BNO. In response, China said it would no longer recognize BNOs. Speaking of the UK has revoked the license of Chinese state-owned broadcaster CGTN, which is the English version of China Central Television. It comes after the media regulator Ofcom concluded that the news channel was ultimately controlled by the ruling Communist Party of China. I could have told them that years ago, but better late than never. It also comes after Ofcom ruled that CGTN repeatedly breached impartiality standards with its coverage of protests last year in Hong Kong. And it also comes after a complaint by Peter Humphrey, a UK citizen who was forced to give a confession while in a Chinese prison. CGTN then broadcast that forced confession on its channel in the UK, which was illegal. We had Humphrey on our podcast a few months ago. Check that out for more. And you may remember in a recent episode I talked about Lai Xiaomin, China's most corrupt official. He was caught with 3 metric tons of cash that came from bribes, as well as 100 mistresses. And now, he has been executed. For the bribes, not the mistresses. Jack Ma, one of China's richest men. He mysteriously disappeared back in October and reappeared in January. But his troubles are just beginning. First, Chinese state-run media left his name off a list of entrepreneurial leaders. And now, his company, Ant Group, is being forcibly restructured by Chinese regulators. Those are the same regulators Ma criticized back in October, before disappearing for months. And the increased pressure is now causing Chinese tech companies to turn on each other. 2 of China's biggest tech companies are in a lawsuit. Douyin, the company that owns TikTok, is suing Tencent as the government launches an antitrust crackdown on China's tech industry. China is also stockpiling computer chips in response to a US ban. And in the midst of all this, Apple is starting to move production out of China. I do hope the iPhone 13 comes with less slave labor. Also this week, I want to give a big thank you to Australian Senator Eric Abetz for mentioning China Uncensored in the Australian Parliament after we had him on the show last month.
China Uncensored, a YouTube program from the United States.
Also, I guess, thank you for your many years of courageously standing up to the CCP. But mainly, thank you for name-dropping China Uncensored in Parliament. Does this mean that China Uncensored is now in the official parliamentary record? So, despite all the chaos in the world, the Chinese Communist Party hasn't forgotten its core mission: persecuting Chinese people. In the past 3 years, 50 people have been sent to jail for using Twitter. But there are bigger problems. Chinese millennials aren't getting married. So obviously, the solution is boosting masculinity with PE classes. Surely this won't become some insane new government policy that overzealous local officials take to an extreme. But China's top advisory body, the CPPCC, is worried. They say boys have become too delicate, timid, and effeminate after being schooled mostly by women teachers. And so, some affluent parents, worried that their sons are too fragile, are sending them to private boot camps that promise to turn them into real men through army-style drills. In other words, a new generation of soldiers for the US-China Cold War. And we end where we began. And now, it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Tommy Hoover asks, "Y'all should play Socialism Monopoly again. It was hilarious. We watched the whole thing, LOL." Tommy is talking about a recent episode of our podcast, China Unscripted. We play the very real game, Monopoly Socialism. It was a lot of fun for us. But this reminds me of an idea I had for a new show. One where Matt, Shelley, and I talk about news and politics while playing through video games. It could be a fun way to get people into some topics that might be a little too dry or too serious on their own. But I'd love to hear what you think about that idea. Does that sound like a show you'd watch? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for your question, Tommy, and thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.